The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
The Pittsburgh Steelers have won the AFC North title.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast.
Can't say enough about how resilient this team was in this win and in this season for the Steelers to go throughout the season the way they did, go the ups, the downs, losing last week, not having DK Metcalf last week or this week, the injuries that they sustained all year, TJ Watt's collapsed lung and how he's had to play through that, the rough stretch where they lost 3 or 4 games from October to November, just time and time again being booed by their own fans, the chance to fire Mike Tomlin, and this team rallies to win 4 of 5 down the stretch twice. They beat the Baltimore Ravens, and doing so in insane fashion in this game. We got a lot to break down. I mean, first of all, the end is bananas. You know, the kick, very Mike Vanderjagt like with going wide right. Tyler Loop missing the kick with 44 yards at the end of the game after Chris Boswell missed an extra point that could have let the Ravens win the game with that kick. But I got to focus on what the Steelers did to win this game. And of all the times that Aaron Rodgers has shown throughout this season to justify him being the guy, justify the reason why the Steelers waited 4 months to sign him, why everyone thought they were crazy. Even myself, I wasn't keen on the move when they were bringing him in. I'm like, he's going to be 42 in November. How are you going to do this? Man, did he deliver in big ways. The Steelers were 9 of 16 on third downs in this game, and Aaron Rodgers was a big factor in making sure that was something that they were able to do. Mind you, they came into this game as like the 19th best third down offense against a Ravens defense that ranked 9th in third down defense. That's a top 10 third down defense. And they came into the league ranking in the bottom half, and they needed it. They absolutely needed it in this game. Aaron Rodgers finished the game 31 of 47 for 294 yards and a touchdown pass. And, of course, it was that 26-yard touchdown pass that he threw to who else but Calvin Austin, who finished the game with 3 catches for 55 yards and that 26-yard touchdown. The Steelers, I thought, were at time early on. They struggled like they have early, but Aaron Rodgers continues to find things in games to adjust, to hit things. He didn't last week against the Browns. He did, a couple of drives where they didn't finish. But in this game, you saw them start slow, but eventually he started to figure things out. The run game started to pick up, and then he started hitting in the weaknesses of the Ravens defense. And again, without DK Metcalf, the guy who's been his number one guy and who's kind of teed everything up for everyone else, it was a huge performance. I also thought it was interesting hearing Aaron Rodgers talk about that play and how the offense had to pull through without DK Metcalf. I want to give you a chance to listen to him talking about the touchdown and how Calvin Austin wasn't even – he asked Calvin, what do you want on this play? Calvin wasn't sure. And someone said, cook him. And, man, did Calvin Austin cook him with that hitch and go. I forget who the DB was. I think it was Wouzier. He fell for the stutter step. Aaron Rodgers saw him and he threw it. Listen to Aaron Rodgers break that play down and give credit to his playmakers in this game who, again, had to deliver without the guy who was designed to be the number one receiver in DK Metcalf. Here's Aaron Rodgers after the game.
Calvin's the sweetest guy. I mean, he is. Just ever since the Malibu trip in the offseason, just have such a love and appreciation for Cal and his disposition. And multiple times in the huddle, I'm asking him on various plays, what do you want on the backside? What do you want on the backside? And he wouldn't give me a straight answer. And on this particular huddle conversation, I said, what do you want, Cal? He said, and somebody to my right, I don't know if it was McCormick or Pat, said something about like, man, just go cook him or something. So I said, all right, Cal, you run the hitch and go back there. And I was really thinking the front side 3-man combination that we worked and had success with most of the night was kind of my first thought. But I just peeked back to the left and saw number 3 slip, and it's a gimme touchdown. But I'm proud of Calvin, and the line really gave me a lot of time all day. They played really well.
What do you think it says about this passing offense? You guys have been big plays in a big game without DK Metcalf, the guy who's been a leader for you guys a lot this year.
Well, we got a lot of talented guys, a lot of capable guys. Proud of the way that we responded. There's some things that happened in the game that we've been trying to get to the entire season, hadn't really shown up. Like Pat on the second last drive had a big, double up stutter down the middle completion. We've been talking about that thing since Latrobe and haven't really had a lot of opportunities. But he ran just an absolute beautiful route that kind of set us up. Then we had the craziness of the helmet conking out and the personnel groupings we had on the field and the wristband. I mean, it was chaos. But we got to a good call there on third down to run it in, and then the 2-minute drive. Started off with a nice, quick game completion, and I thought we were efficient and had a chance on third down to go to Cal, and he ran a good route, and we made it happen.
Well, Aaron Rodgers talking about there, and I'm going to get him talking about Pat Freiermuth in a minute because he gives him a lot of credit, not just for this game, but for all season hanging in there the way that he has. But I think Aaron Rodgers was like, hey, he was wide open, but go back and watch the route when Calvin Austin hits the butter step on the hitch and go. Woozier just loses his feet. He just completely stumbles. He did cook him. And what a moment for Calvin Austin, by the way, who a lot of people have downplayed him throughout this year. And heck, he's gotten hurt. He hasn't had a chance to be as much of a playmaker as you'd like. But in a game where they needed someone to step up, and I said they needed someone to step up and make a big play down the field. And man, did he do it in the clutchest of moments to make that happen. But this game can't be won without several other guys. Jaylen Warren, 14 carries, 66 yards, also caught all 5 of his targets for 33 yards. He combines for 99 all-purpose yards. Kenneth Gainwell, 5 rushes for 10 yards, nothing big there, but he did get the touchdown run that he had. But he also caught 8 of 9 passes for 64 yards. The Warriors that they are, but can't overlook. I mean, and also I'm not trying to pass up on anybody, but Adam Thielen, 3 catches for 43 yards. He comes in. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, we were giving him a lot last week for not being able to make plays. 5 catches for 34 yards, just solid contributions. But Pat Freiermuth, 3 catches, 51 yards, and just how this guy stays locked in when he's not the primary concern continues to show why this team believes in that guy. I still think it's ridiculous that they don't key up more plays for him to be the primary target and feed him the ball, especially when you don't have a DK Metcalf. But listen to Aaron Rodgers talk about, he acknowledges Pat hasn't gotten the bulk of targets, and he could be pouting. And that's something that we saw George Pickens do a lot last year when he wasn't the primary concern, lollygagging in his routes, not finishing. And even when it was time to come back to him, he wouldn't be as locked in. Pat, that's never been an issue for Pat Freiermuth. And he came up in a big way in this game multiple times for 51 yards. I think he had a strike for 14, another strike for 31. The 31 set up the touchdown, I think, for Kenneth Gainwell. Listen to Aaron Rodgers talk about Pat Freiermuth, and I think it'll grow your appreciation as a Steelers fan for not only how good of a player he is, but how good of a soldier he is and how he's never complained, even when he hasn't been getting the bulk share of the targets or the snaps at tight end. Here was Aaron Rodgers on Pat Freiermuth.
Pat Freiermuth hasn't gotten the bulk of targets this year, but he continues to come up, and it seems like in big moments for you guys. What can you say about his focus to be there when you need him, especially in those huge moments today?
I have a lot of respect for Pat, first and foremost. The way he's handled himself this entire season. Pat is a dynamic player, and with the emergence of Darnell and the big personnel that we've done, he hasn't had as many snaps as he's used to or would have wanted. But not one time this entire year, and he's my locker mate, so I can say this with absolute confidence and 100% honesty, not one time did I hear him complain about his snap count, about anything. It was there's a lot to be said for that. I think that's a lost part of this league, to be able to humble yourself and kind of lean into the collective instead of making it about yourself week in and week out when he knows he can play. And he made plays last week on the 2-minute, and he made plays in the fourth quarter, really all game. I thought we did a good job. Just little things that you talk about in Latrobe and you hope show up. We had 3rd and 10. We went on a first sound. A center snap by Zach, right, where he just kind of goes up, waits, and snaps it. And they bring strong dog. They bring the mic and they bring 44 off the slot. And we talked from day one when I got here. I like throwing vertical peaks, first pressure. So start off by looking vertical. And we actually kind of like made eye contact in the huddle and just said, be alert. And then sure enough, he widens slightly like he's supposed to. He catches the ball with his hands. He gets 14 yards, and that's a drive continuing. We talked on through routes. If you get two man, double up, take your time, give him an outbreak look, and then go down the middle. And on the second last drive, he ran an absolutely unbelievable route. And it was just perfect. I mean, I'm literally throwing it, kind of laughing at myself because I'm like, this is it. See, I've been talking about this forever. But I'm just really proud of him. I can't say enough good things about Pat. He is an exceptional human and a great teammate, and there's a lot to be said for that in this league.
NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
The Carolina Panthers are NFC South Division champions for the first time since 2015.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast.
The Atlanta Falcons 19, the New Orleans Saints 17, which means that your Carolina Panthers, for the first time in a decade, since 2015, the first time since 2017, are division champions, and they're headed to the postseason. Take it all in. Take it all in. They had to do it the hardest way possible, but damn it, they did it, man. 8-9, that gets you in. Only in the NFC South, it seems. That is how things can play out. And it had to be this way, right? It couldn't have been the simple way of winning that game against New Orleans back in week 15, even though someone said to me earlier today, do you really believe, considering what we've seen over the last month, that they would have won that game against Tampa after beating the Saints? And honestly, no, considering what we've seen over the last month, but doesn't really matter now because now they're in the playoffs. They could have made it easy by beating Seattle, even though not really easy considering that the Seahawks are 14-3 and the top seed in the NFC after their win last night against San Francisco. And they could have made it easier by winning yesterday, not rushing for only 1.4 yards per carry, not having a boneheaded flea flicker from the 20 freaking yard line. And yeah, the officials not screwing them over as well. They could have done it the easy way, but it's never going to be easy, right? It's not supposed to be easy, but for the Carolina Panthers especially, do they ever want it to be easy? Nah, they don't. They even said that last Sunday after the loss against Seattle. There wasn't a lot of, frowns and melancholy people in that locker room. Like, yeah, how else would you want it than right here, needing to go on the road against your division rival in Tampa and try to beat them, which, of course, they did not do. They blew it, but here they are, sitting at 8-9 and still in the playoffs, hosting a playoff game likely next Saturday. We'll talk about that here momentarily when the game may be here in Uptown Charlotte. And honestly, I'm just happy for y'all. Truly am. I've been doing this show for the last 5 seasons. The Panthers are 27-58 since I've been hosting this show. That record would not lead you to believe that I would have ever gotten the opportunity to do this show and to do the shows we're going to do this week. And hopefully, we'll see. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, of course, but to do this week talking about a playoff game, getting to go cover a playoff game here in my hometown of Charlotte. So really happy for my hometown. Happy for all of y'all who have been here since the beginning of this show, but also been here as Panther fans for years, whether it's been a couple of seasons, been a decade, been since it was announced that Charlotte was getting a team. I'm happy for all of y'all that have been through the ups and downs, had the deal of David Tepper's BS, finally hiring the right head coach, hiring the right general manager, right executive vice president of football operations, and getting a quarterback who, hell, he's had plenty of issues the last 3 years Bryce Young has. But in that game yesterday, he wasn't the problem. Yeah, the interception, not great, but you got what you needed out of your quarterback, and you've gotten what you needed out of your quarterback really over the last month of the season, aside from that game last Sunday against Seattle. He's been good enough for you, and certainly there's still issues that this team has heading into the playoffs, but we'll worry about those as we break down this game throughout the rest of the week. This is all about celebrating, being happy that the Panthers have finally got over the top here in the NFC South and gotten back into the playoffs, but they get in because of a three-way tiebreaker. I did not want to give any credence to this possible scenario when it was brought up to me a couple of weeks ago. I was more focused on maybe Tampa and Carolina actually being decent teams and getting in at 9-8 or at 10-7 and how the tiebreakers would work out that way. But there was always that distinct possibility that Falcons, led by Kirk Cousins, who I'm pretty sure just played his last game as an Atlanta Falcon, maybe his last game in the NFL this Sunday. There was always a possibility that the Kirk Cousins-led Falcons, with Raheem Morris on the hot seat, could win their final 4 games and set up a three-way tiebreaker with Carolina being at 8-9, Tampa at 8-9, and Atlanta at 8-9. I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. I also didn't really believe that there was any possible way that the Bucs were going to lose to the Quinn Ewers-led Miami Dolphins, and I have been wrong all along the way, and good thing I have been wrong, because I'm wrong plenty of times, of course. But look, this is where they're at. It was a three-way tiebreaker, all three of those teams sitting at 8-9, and it got to division record, which they're all tied at 3-3. Then it came down to head-to-head win percentage among the 3 teams. Carolina, they are 3-1. Tampa is 2-2, and the Falcons are 1-3. And that now allows the Panthers to be NFC South Division champions by way of the tiebreaker. I guess technically they tie for first place, but the team that gets to go play for the Lombardi Trophy here starting this weekend is a team here in Charlotte. So congratulations to all those guys for getting that opportunity. And thank God for the back door. I sat there on Monday and kind of was like annoyed by the fact that the Rams, a team that I've really been gassing up over the last couple of weeks on Locked On NFL, even on this show when we had the crossover episode, that they've just completely fallen apart and they couldn't beat this Falcons team. But it did leave the back door open. I like the stakes of you either get it done or you don't. And when you look at it, if the Panthers are 8-9 and the Bucs are 8-9, and of course Atlanta's 8-9, like, are any of these teams deserving of being in the playoffs? I mean, no, but what does deserve have to do about it? Nothing at all. And here's the thing, like, don't apologize that this team won the division, that your team won the division, and that this team's going to be playing for an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl, which unlikely going to happen. My buddy who covers the Pats texted me saying, see you in San Francisco. I would love for that to be the possibility, Tom, New England, they're certainly going to be in a great spot, even though they have a team that hasn't really been in this position, which Carolina hasn't as well. But there are plenty of Super Bowl winners on this roster, especially defensively, that can help them moving forward. Didn't really help them the last month as they kept blowing it, but hey, they're in it. And Nick Scott talked about this in the locker room last night after that loss in Tampa, saying, quote, "I could not care less, man. A hat and t-shirt is a hat and t-shirt. This game is all about getting into the dance. Then once you're in the playoffs, anything can happen. Clean slate record doesn't matter. I've seen teams that, quote unquote, have no business being in the playoffs and knock somebody off in the first round. I don't care how I get in. I just want to get in." Well, congratulations, Nick. You're in. And like, he's right. We've seen it so many times, and the home field aspect of it is why we've seen those upsets with teams that shouldn't be in the playoffs. And I guess we can throw Carolina in that category. Well, the last time we could say that about the Panthers 11 years ago, back in 2014, when they were 3-7-1 and then won out to get to 7-9-1 or whatever it was, 7-8-1. Yeah, they won 4 games in a row to get 7-8-1. That was a team that no one felt like should be in the playoffs. And, is the division format, the playoff format, the right format for the NFL? And we heard about that last year when Sam Darnold led Minnesota Vikings, won 13 games, blew it in week 18, and then they had to go on the road. Well, they had to go down to Arizona because of the wildfires there in Los Angeles. They had to go on the road, couldn't have a home playoff game, and then they lost. And man, that can't be the case. Well, these are the rules, and this is why you don't apologize, because we all knew when the season began what needed to be done to get into the playoffs, and the possibility that there could be a tiebreaker situation like the one that we've had here right now in the NFC South. Did I think this is how it was going to end when the season kicked off? No, I definitely did not, but I'm happy that this, of course, is the result for Carolina getting in this way. And I mean, look, when they were 7-9-1 or 7-8-1 back in 2014, I've got to get my mind wrapped around that. There used to be 16 games, and now we're on like year 4 of 17 games. That season, they won their home playoff game. Now, the Cardinals were down to their third string quarterback, Ryan Lindley, and that had a lot to do with them winning that game, but also it was a team that was red hot. Had Cam Newton. Remember that guy? Ended up being the MVP of the league the next season. They had Luke. They had TD. They had plenty of talented players on that roster who had gone 12-4 the year prior, and they had that experience. So it was not necessarily surprising that at home in front of a ruckus Bank of America Stadium that they were able to get the job done. And then the next week, they gave Seattle all they could handle. And what do you know? Looking at how it could play out here, if Carolina is able to knock off either the Rams or the 49ers, they go to Seattle. So maybe that's how it plays out. Again, Brock Purdy did suffer a stinger last night in that game. Don't really think that's going to be something that keeps him out next week in the playoffs. That's a banged up team. The Rams, they've been really weird here over the last half of the season. But that could be the opponent for Carolina, depending on how things play out here. Coming at 4:25 Eastern time as the Rams are facing off against the Cardinals, I believe, in LA. But yeah, look, this team blew it multiple times. They blew it against the Saints. They blew it against the Seahawks. They blew it against the Bucs, even though, like, okay, like the Saints game, as I mentioned earlier, do they come back and actually beat Tampa? Based on what we've seen, probably not. The Seahawks game, they're 14-3. They didn't blow it. Yes, it was an opportunity where had they won that game, they're in the playoffs, but that's the best team record-wise in the NFL this season. Hard to say they blew it there. Yesterday, yeah, you didn't do a great job. Refs didn't help. Play calling didn't help. Not being able to run the football, which has been a problem the last 8 games, didn't help. That turnover didn't help. We all understand it. But here they are. New season, clean slate, records don't matter. And here's the thing, too. Like, every game in this league matters. And we're all guilty of thinking, oh, well, they're not going to win this game. Let's just focus on what's going to happen after that. And I certainly did that with the Rams game. I did not think there was any possible way this team was going to beat LA that Sunday, which they were able to do. So every game matters. And it just turned out that this season, the game back in week 3 at home against Atlanta, the game in week 11 down in Atlanta, and the game week 16, a couple weeks ago, here in Charlotte against Tampa, those were the games that had overstated importance for Carolina. And this is why they're in the playoffs. They've had their moments where they beat Green Bay, they beat the Rams, and they had their moments where they lost to the Saints twice, and they lost to Arizona. But those 3 games in particular, twice against Atlanta and once against Tampa at home, that's why we're sitting here having this conversation, because they win the tiebreaker with that. Sitting 3-1 head-to-head win percentage against Tampa and Atlanta, sitting at 8-9 and NFC South Division champions, first time in a decade. Soak it in, man. Soak it in. Enjoy it. Celebrate. And I hope everybody can get to that. I mean, not everybody can. Only 73,000 or so seats. But I hope everybody who has the means can get in the stadium and be able to check it out. And I get the frustration last night. You heard in my voice when we talked about it. But we always knew there's still a possibility that we could be turning around less than 24 hours later. 20 hours later, and be able to talk about the Panthers being division champions, and we were able to do that.
Arthur Blank actually did it. He fired both Raheem and Terry, so perhaps the future is bright.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast.
Less than 5 hours after the Falcons' Week 18 win over the New Orleans Saints, that Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot are out as head coach and general manager of this team. We'll talk about how we got here, what's next for this team, where does Matt Ryan figure into this, who are some of the top candidates for both of these roles that we will have to keep our eyes on in the coming weeks and over the next month or so as this process unfolds. But Terry and Raheem are gone, and of course the question is, how did we get here, right? And it's essentially the reason why we got here is when Raheem Morris was hired in 2024, obviously Terry Fontenot was hired in 2021. The expectations for Raheem going into that 2024 season that he was supposed to win. The expectations were that Terry Fontenot, in his 3 years as the general manager here in Atlanta up to that point, had built a playoff caliber roster. That the shortcomings of that 2023 Falcon team stemmed from the head coach in Arthur Smith and stemmed from the quarterback in Desmond Ridder. And that the Falcons could figure that, and they deemed Raheem Morris to be that coach, And they then subsequently deemed Kirk Cousins to be that quarterback that would get them over the hump to being the playoff team. And it didn't work with Kirk Cousins. And obviously the Falcons also selected Michael Penix with that top 2024 draft pick. And they basically were like, well, okay, it didn't work with Kirk Cousins in 2024. Well, it's going to work in 2025 with Michael Penix. And it didn't work. And that's really those two bets that's all the Falcons really needed to get over the hump, was that bet on those quarterbacks was really the bet that kind of blew up in Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot's faces. That, as you've heard me say many times on this podcast over the years, over the months, over the weeks, this team was far too complacent about how good a football roster they had already built, and far too complacent about how far they needed to go in order to get over that hump, to go from the perennial 7-win team that they were under Arthur Smith and previous coaches. And all Raheem Morris and the quarterbacks did were add one more win to those totals with 2 8-9 finishes. And that clearly was not good enough for ownership. It wasn't good enough for this fan base, and that's how we got here. And the hope is that this firing, because the rumors over the last 48 hours had been that Raheem was going to stay and Terry was going to go and all that sort of stuff. And it just felt like it was a half measure. It felt like, once again, the Falcons were going to be complacent, believing that, hey, because they played really well in some primetime games in front of, national TV audience, that, the perception of this team was once again going to be, hey, you just got to tweak a couple of things and we'll be right there. And hopefully this move now means that the Falcons are not going to be in that mindset, or not going to be in that complacent mindset, and they're actually going to do the work to become a better football team, as opposed to just believing that they can take shortcuts, which is what they've been trying to do for the better part of a decade. Right? They'll get new people in the building. Those new people will not be beholden to this roster, right? That was never going to be the case with Terry Fontenot. Terry Fontenot was going to believe my roster is great. We have conviction, all the stuff that Terry Fontenot spews. And they were just going to basically run it back with basically the same team. They were going to have the ultimate faith in their roster, in the roster that they already built. It was already good enough. We just need to tweak it. We just need to adjust it. And, I think more than anything, that not only obviously had an impact on Terry Fontenot's status, right? But I think that was probably the biggest reason for the downfall of Raheem Morris, is that he had far too much confidence in the roster, in the middling roster that ultimately it proved to be over and over and over and over again, 5 times in a row. The middling roster that Terry Fontenot had. And if Raheem had come in here and been a little bit more aggressive with being like, yeah, Terry, you've gotten us 40% up the mountain. We got to get the other 60% up, as opposed to what they essentially did, which is like, oh, we're already like 80% up the mountain. We just got to get the last 20%, right? If Raheem come in there with that type of mentality, I think this team, and been a lot more aggressive with some of the moves that they made over the last 2 off seasons, particularly in free agency, maybe a little less aggressive in the draft, but, have been a lot more aggressive with that and getting immediate contributors in free agency. I think this team probably would have found success under Raheem Morris. I really do believe that. But obviously they did not do that. And, you couple that mistake with the fact that the on-field product just wasn't very good under Raheem Morris, right? We talked about this throughout the season, like when talking about Raheem Morris's job status, where it's like, if you're going to run it back with Raheem, why? What is it that Raheem is bringing to the table as a head coach that you're like, sign me up for more of that, right? The main thing with Raheem, because he's not really calling plays on offense or defense, is his clock management, right? His in-game management. Subpar, simply put, right? You're not talking about a team that plays up to their potential every single week, right? If this was a Dan Campbell-led Lions team that we saw, you go back to that first year under Dan Campbell, where that team was one of the worst rosters in the NFL, but were consistently competitive each and every week, we'd be having a different conversation. But this team played up to their competition and also played down to their competition, and you never knew which version of the Atlanta Falcons you were going to get. And then it's like the other aspect of being a head coach is hiring good coordinators. And Raheem didn't hire good coordinators, right? You give the Jeff Ulbrich hire, the redo of the defensive coordinator hire that he had after the failure of Jimmy Lake in year 1 in 2024. You do the redo of that DC hire with Jeff Ulbrich in 2025, and you get that A+. That's 1 out of 4 coordinator hires that Raheem Morris had made. Successful ones, right? Ulbrich was a successful one. Zach Robinson didn't live up to the hype. Jimmy Lake certainly didn't live up to the hype. That's why he got fired. And Marcus Williams didn't live up to the hype, right? That's not a good, hit rate, 1 of 4. And even if you did give him a do-over to redo the offensive coordinator hire and the special teams hire this offseason, and by keeping him, even if he hit on both of those, you still have a 3 for 6, right? A 50-50 proposition when it comes to coordinators. Like, how many swings are you going to get with that? Even if it gets over the hump, and then, if it does get you over the hump, then, those guys are going to leave, and then you got to hire new coordinators, and, how many swings are you going to get? So ultimately, I think the Falcons made the right decision, right? It felt like the Falcons under Raheem Morris were destined for another disappointing 7 or 8 win season. Maybe their ceiling was 9, maybe 10 wins if everything went their way next year. But there was really no path for this team to get significantly better with the current decision makers here because of a lot of the poor decisions made by Terry Fontenot, because of not having the draft capital, of not having any cap space, right? We talked about this on previous episode, but we talked about this this time last year. Everybody wanted Terry Fontenot gone. And I sat here on this podcast and said, I want to see if Terry can dig himself out of the hole. And Terry's solution to digging himself out of the hole was digging even deeper, right? By giving the team less draft capital, by giving the team less cap space, all for this notion of, hey, if we just get the pass rushers in here, it'll solve our problems. And sure, you solved the pass rush, but it didn't solve the rest of the team problems because there were other issues. That's the issue. This team constantly misdiagnoses its problems. They don't self-evaluate. They look at their team and they say, we only have 1 problem to solve when they have 5 problems to solve. And that was not going to change by running it back with either Terry Fontenot or Raheem Morris this offseason. And that needs to change, essentially, until this team can look at themselves honestly in the mirror and realize, yes, we have 4 or 5 things that we need to address, as opposed to constantly convincing themselves that they only have 1 or 2. Things were not going to get better.
NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
The Phoenix Suns defeat the Oklahoma City Thunder, getting their best, most improbable win of the season.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast.
When you come into games, you do have an idea of what might not happen. I'm thinking about matchups because I'm going to be very honest with you. I think the Suns are Oklahoma City light. I think they are the great value version of what the Oklahoma City Thunder do. I've been saying that for a couple of months now. That is not a new thought either from me or even some other people. I don't think that that's something I came up with, just on my own. I think it's a very clear description of what the Suns do. The Suns don't have the shot makers that the Oklahoma City Thunder do. SGA, Chet Holmgren, even Alex Caruso at times. And then obviously Jalen Williams, who was, superb tonight as well with 23 points, or good enough with 23 points tonight. Him and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, combined for 50-plus points tonight. And I didn't think there was any shot in the world the Suns could beat this team. And the reasoning for that is because, and I put this in my notes and I was watching the game, it is just a very small window of error or margin of error that you can work with, not when you're playing the Oklahoma City Thunder. That's one thing. But when you are the Phoenix Suns and are as deficient in talent and shot makers than the Oklahoma City Thunder have, the Suns' window of opportunity is very clearly, if you're going to beat the Oklahoma City Thunder, is someone's got to have an off night or someone can't go nuclear. Either of those things are synonymous. And Chet Holmgren had 18 points tonight. He was 8 for 11. He was good. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander wasn't great. He was 8 for 22 from the field. There's your player right there who didn't play great. Jalen Williams, 23 points, 9 for 13 from the field. The Suns' window of error has to include one of those things. Someone's got to play not great. Or no one's got to go nuclear like Chet Holmgren did the first time the Suns played. And then it's also got to be, okay, the Suns got to get someone outside of Devin Booker and Dylan Brooks to make timely buckets. Check, check. Jordan Goodwin, who we're going to talk about more in just a little bit. The Suns also got to shoot fairly well from three-point land. 40%. Well, what did the Oklahoma City Thunder do? 31%. The Suns cannot let them, kill them on the boards. They didn't do that. The Suns out-rebounded them by 20. Well, turnovers. Suns got to limit the turnovers. Now, that's the one thing the Suns didn't win. But the other things were so drastic when you talk about rebounding and, Jordan Goodwin going off. That was the perfect formula to beat the Oklahoma City Thunder. And it truly has to make you think again, wait a second. I put this Suns team in a box early in the season. Well, okay, they're not going to be better than a play-in team. Like that's out of the ordinary. They can't do that. Okay, they should be the 9 seed. And then they get on a little bit of a run, and then you say to yourself, wait a second. They're beating good teams. They're beating the Timberwolves twice, I might add. The Timberwolves still haven't beat them this year. They should have beat the Lakers 3 times. They beat the Clippers, who are hot right now, 2 times. And they're beating these good teams. They beat the Spurs twice. And it just, again, makes you think, wait a second, how good is this team? And then it was a game of runs. It was a game of just outright runs in this game. The first quarter, the Oklahoma City Thunder got up like 24-9. And honestly, I said to myself right there, okay, we got to start looking for other storylines. That's where I start to stress a little bit. When the Suns get down big against a superior team, I say to myself, okay, we got to find something else because I don't want to just talk about why they lost, how they lost. Like, that's going to come naturally. But the Suns snapped back into it in the first quarter. Some of it was, some of it just was the Phoenix Suns going on a little bit of runs here, a little bit of runs there, and it felt like the quarters or halves were ending at the absolute worst times. The Suns ended the first quarter, I think, on a 9-0 run. They ended the second quarter, and I want to make sure I get this one right, because it was much more of a bigger deal, on a 7-0 run once again. And I wrote right here, Suns closed on a 7-0 run. Again, bad time for the quarter to end. This is what happens when the Oklahoma City Thunder get a little complacent, and I think they did. They walked in here thinking, we beat this team by 50 points. I know they're home this time, but we could still beat them by 20. What did I say at the beginning of the season? Now, this had nothing to do with this current Phoenix Suns team, because this current Phoenix Suns team is obviously better than I thought, but this principle still aligns. And that is, and I always thought this from the beginning, I just didn't think it'd be this good, which I don't think any of us thought they'd be this good. The Suns are going to be the team that if you walk into their arena thinking, okay, it's a random Sunday night against the Phoenix Suns, this is a gimme game, you're going to get your ass beat if you do that. You got to come in here and still play your A game. If you play your A game, you could beat the Suns. If you're a much more superior team, like the Thunder, like the Nuggets, for sure you can do that. But don't come in here and sleepwalk, and they sleptwalked. And the Suns had one way to really win this game, aside from all those other things that had to happen. They had to make it, and none of this really happens if the Suns don't do this one thing, so shame on me for not leaning into it first. The Suns had to make this gross. They had to make it a bar fight. If SGA was going to go to the line, he was going to earn it. It's so funny, sidebar to this, how sensitive Oklahoma City Thunder fans are to the SGA foul discrepancy conversation, because all I did was tweet out, it's so frustrating how officials routinely give SGA these calls when he's flopping or falling right to the floor. Like, they routinely give him these calls, and they see that they do it, and they keep doing it. And all I did was tweet that out. I didn't come out saying SGA was a foul merchant. I don't think that's true. I think he's a superb player. People know my, disdain for Devin Booker foul baiting in these games or in games as a whole. I don't like that. So it was just, and it's just so funny because I had a bunch of Thunder fans come after me. You don't watch, you're not even looking, you don't understand basketball. I'm like, okay, yeah, you telling me how sensitive you are to it tells me that there might be some merit to that. Here's the other thing as well. I know other Locked On channels do this, but I want you guys to go do this as well. Anytime the Suns win a game, we'll come up with a cool name for it. Go invade the other locked on host comment sections like they do me. Whenever the Rockets win, they say it release the Hounds and they come after me. If you're a Locked On Suns listener and you're a loyal Suns fan, listener of the show, go to Oklahoma City Thunder's comment section. Be nice. We want to be, there's sportsmanship in this, but maybe have a playful dig about how the Phoenix Suns beat the Oklahoma City Thunder. Again, kind, not rude, but it might be fun just to go and just poke them just a little bit in the ribs, just to let them know the young and mighty Phoenix Suns team beat them. But again, back to this. Again, be kind about it. I like Rylan. He's great at Locked On Thunder. But it'd just be fun to kind of poke him a little bit. Be like, oh, hey, the Suns team that you beat by 50 came and beat you again this week. Again, the Suns had one way to win this game. It was to make it gross. It was to make it ugly. It was to win on the boards. It was to push SGA around. I don't know if SGA has ever been that uncomfortable on a basketball floor. And it was a team combined effort. And we're going to get to Jordan Goodman. We're going to get to Dylan Brooks. And we're going to get to Devin Booker. But there were so many times I felt like I was coaching the Suns. I'm up there in the media section. I'm like, okay, someone's got to rotate over. You got to double team him. You got to swing over to the outside, make sure that someone doesn't get an open three. The Suns defense was so good tonight. Night and day. From not just their energy against the Sacramento Kings on Friday, which I thought the Suns kind of sleptwalked a little bit, but again, they still beat the Kings. But this win felt personal. This felt personal. Do you remember the last time the Oklahoma City Thunder beat the Suns' ass? They won by damn near 50. And it sent the Suns into a little bit of a skid, where even I was like, okay, maybe they're regressing to the mean just a little bit. Not a bad thing, just might be a little bit of regressing to the mean. They're not a bad team. And it felt like the Suns read all those headlines. Combine it with the fact that the Oklahoma City Thunder came into this game thinking, we can play our B game, we're going to beat the bleep out of you. And that just didn't happen. I've never seen SGA, the amount of times I've watched him, be that uncomfortable on a floor. I've never seen the Suns, even this season, play with that much passion. It felt personal. They got ran off the court. Chet Holmgren was making fun of them. He didn't have his shoes on for the full entirety of the last game. That's not a joke. That's not being facetious. That's serious. And the Suns came out here, and they did everything they were supposed to do. Get on the boards. Out-rebound them. They did that by a lot. Push SGA around. He's going to get his foul calls. Might as well make him worth it. And then make it gross. Don't let Jalen Williams take it over. Credit to Jordan Knott calling the timely timeouts. But it was also a key role player. And then, of course, Devin Booker's heroics on a three-point jumper. That was so crisp and so beautiful, you just knew it was going in.
NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
Curt Cignetti does it again. Another commit for Indiana. This time, it's your starting quarterback.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Josh Hoover. That's right. Josh Hoover, the TCU quarterback transfer, has picked Indiana. He will be your starting quarterback in the year of 2026. And oh my goodness, what a day this has been already. You've picked up 2 commitments early. You've picked up another 2 down the stretch. Make this 5 now that Indiana has picked up on this Sunday afternoon. And we had to go live. We had to go live and talk about the insanity that today is of transfer portal mania for Indiana football, as they said, you know what? Let's get all of our visitors in. Let's get everybody here, and let's make Sunday our day. Josh Hoover is now an Indiana Hoosier. And man, it doesn't get better than this, folks. It really doesn't. You're talking about a guy who was at TCU for 4 years, okay, threw for over 3,000 yards this past season, nearly 3,500 yards this past season. He has over 9,000 yards in his career, over 70 passing touchdowns as well. This dude's a gunslinger. He absolutely is a baller. He's a winner. He's a great quarterback, a great passer, a great decision maker, and he will fit perfectly in the Indiana offense. I mean, this was a match made in heaven. Okay, there were several quarterbacks out there in the transfer portal window that we knew were going to enter and that eventually did, right? We knew about Mestamaker. We knew about Hoover. We knew Sam Levitt, Brendan Sorsby. There's a lot of names out there. But Josh Hoover just made the most sense to me with how he plays, pocket passer, deep down the field, pro-level throws. He just seemed to make the most sense for Indiana. And now he is your quarterback for 2026. And there were some conversations, right, about if it was going to be Alberto Mendoza's show or if they would bring in a quarterback. If you listened or watched Locked On Hoosiers consistently, you know that we told you a transfer portal quarterback was coming. And Josh Hoover felt like the perfect option, felt like the best choice for Indiana. Was he the highest ranked transfer portal quarterback? No, he wasn't. Was he the highest ranked portal player at all? No, he wasn't. But since when does Indiana care about that? Since when do the Hoosiers give a darn about rankings and stars and things like that? The Hoosiers simply don't. And for people that want to live in that world, who, if you're not just the super 5-star and ranked 1,000 or whatever, then I don't want you, then you can live that life. That's fine. Indiana has proven they go get players they want and players they know that can win football games. And Josh Hoover is that guy. This past season at TCU, he had a 66% completion percentage, threw for almost 3,500 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. His passer rating was 153. Folks, that's really, really good. That's really good, okay? Over 9,000 yards in his career. Again, over 70 touchdowns in his career, the exact number. Okay, he has thrown for 9,629 yards, 71 touchdowns, and just 33 interceptions. Also has 8 rushing touchdowns as well. So he kind of can do it all, can Josh Hoover. And a guy that will be a senior, have a year of eligibility stepping in. You just went and got one of the best players in the portal. Pair that with Nick Marsh, who you just picked up from Michigan State earlier today. Pretty darn good 1-2 punch offensively, if you ask me. Pretty darn good in just a couple of days of the portal being open and Indiana just now getting started. Because we had to play in a Rose Bowl, in case people forgot. We had a college football playoff game we had to worry about. And now you hit the portal and you have fixed the quarterback problem for 2026 because, look, we love Fernando Mendoza. There's no doubt we love him. He's not coming back. He ain't coming back. And he shouldn't. It would be dumb for him to do so. He can go to the pros, get drafted, and try to make a career on Sundays. You needed an answer. You needed a fix. And Josh Hoover is that guy. And I think this is a dream scenario for all parties involved, for Josh Hoover and his camp, for Indiana and theirs. Because we've talked about Indiana becoming a quarterback dreamland, a destination location for guys like Josh Hoover, who can simply throw it all over their yard. Why would you not want to come to Indiana as a quarterback? 2 transfer quarterbacks have already worked here, right? Curtis Rourke from Ohio, he's playing in the NFL. And Fernando Mendoza from California, he just won the Heisman Trophy. Every quarterback in the portal should have been knocking on the door and calling the phone of Indiana, say, please let me come to Bloomington. I'm begging you. And Josh Hoover said, hey, I'd like to come play there. And Indiana looked at his stats and looked at his film and said, I think we'd like you to play here too. And they come together as Josh Hoover commits to the Indiana Hoosiers. Indiana up to 5 now commits in the class of 2026 for the transfer portal. There are some things okay, that stand out about him, right? I love his downfield passing. I think he had an 85-yard touchdown or an 85-yard pass this season. He's not scared to air it out. He looks like he should be playing in the NFL. He's built like a truck, 6'2", 200 pounds as a quarterback, and he's got experience. Man, I know this is another one-year rental. I get it. I totally understand that there are some concerns on that, but you've got to be excited about the experience that this guy brings. And he's had weapons around him at TCU, and he's played in an up-tempo offensive juggernaut offense like TCU. At times, it's kind of hit or miss, but Josh Hoover makes that thing go. And I think this just makes perfect sense for Indiana.
NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
The portal is spinning, and it has given Nebraska a quarterback.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast.
The first domino seems to have fallen with Notre Dame quarterback Kenny Minchey committing to the Huskers, and he assumes to be, at least in the strong mix, to be Nebraska's starting quarterback next year. So we got stuff to talk about.
That is right. Yeah, there's going to be a quarterback battle, it would seem, at Nebraska. We don't know everything about the quarterback situation. We won't for a couple of more weeks, at least the identity of everyone who's going to be in that room. But we know one big name in that room now is Kenny Minchey, the 3-year Notre Dame backup who is now committed and soon to be signed with Nebraska as the Huskers' first ad of this portal season. So a little bit of just laying this out for you right here. For the next 2 weeks, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start every podcast with the news of the moment, your portal headlines, or if it's not the news of the moment and there's other big things happening in Nebraska football, we will at least get you the portal news somewhere before the first break, because this is like an entire season of recruiting in 10 or 12 days. But it's actually more consequential than an entire season of recruiting, because you are adding and losing starting caliber players, not high school seniors who are 2, 3, or 4 years away from making an impact in the program. This is a sprint to January 16th. Who committed? We'll tell you that. Who's visiting? Who left? Who might leave? And then where do the numbers stand, which is always going to be something to watch. We will tell you that in the third segment of this show. But the headline today, Connor, is that Kenny Minchey is in and Keona Davis is out, among others, to announce their departures on Sunday. Larry Tarver, the DB from Miami, Houston Kahina Torres, the offensive lineman from Hawaii. And on Saturday, it was DBs Ramir Stewart, Braylon Prude, and then defensive lineman Dylan Parrott. So a lot going on in the Nebraska football portal landscape.
Yeah, we had a chance, a little bit of a chance just to give our initial thoughts on this, because it seemed like this is the way we were headed on Friday. And I think, in a couple of days of just trying to understand where people's heads at or on this, I think there is still a fair amount of skepticism that Kenny Minchey has not been a starter. Yeah, a fair amount of skepticism that Kenny Minchey has not been a starter in his college football playing career so far. And and the way it was sort of laid out for the public when his commitment was announced on Sunday was Nebraska landed one of, if not their top target at the quarterback position. And I think that is the truth. And then people wondered, wait a minute, top target? Like, that guy's never played before. What's going on here? And so I think a lot of questions sort of arose that way. I am not worried about it in particular, but I'm curious to hear what you think about it, Mitch.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at it. I mean, you can be a glass half empty guy and say he hasn't proven it at the college level, and Nebraska, with the position that it's in as a program coming off of consecutive 7-win seasons, needs to go right now and add a quarterback who is experienced in winning games at the highest level of the sport. And that's not the direction that it chose to take. And it didn't necessarily pursue those kind of quarterbacks. And I still think there's another quarterback out there for Nebraska to add, but that's not going to be somebody who has been a starter at the P4 level. The fact that that's one thing we know for certain with the addition of Minchie is that the aim for Nebraska now is to have Minchie and TJ Lateef, and things have still got to shake out for TJ Lateef. He says that he wants competition, that he likes competition. He embraces competition. That's what we saw from him in his first year at Nebraska, and he's getting paid well. That's always a factor. It's a huge factor. It's something we should not overlook in these discussions, is the fact that these players are getting paid. I would say both of these two, Lateef and Minchie, in the 2026 season with the contracts that they will have signed, are going to be getting paid between $500,000 and $1 million a piece. Like, that's just the market for that kind of a player. So that needs to be taken into account, because, hey, TJ Lateef may not love the fact that Nebraska added somebody who's going to be right there with him, potentially even a favorite over him going into spring practice, but he's also getting paid very well. And I think Nebraska will add another quarterback and still stay under the total amount of dollars that it paid Dylan Raiola with the 3 that it potentially has on scholarship. I believe that the next quarterback you will hear added to the mix for Nebraska is going to come from a lower level of football. Somebody who is upgrading his pay in a significant way and is coming to Nebraska for just the opportunity to be able to be included in the discussion. So that's kind of where things are at in the quarterback position. Dog.
It's making the dogs bark, man. It's getting the people going.
But what do you think? Like, what's going to be your take on Kenny Minchie, like as a quarterback, not necessarily like how he got here or what it means for the position at large?
Well, I think the approach and the environment in which he walks into shapes sort of how people feel about him right off the bat and the first impression. And I think people are going to have a hard time getting over the fact that he hasn't been a full-time starter yet, and they'll wonder, okay, well, do you have enough money? And I think the answer to that is still, Nebraska is fine to compete in the category of guys that they feel like they can go after and pay them. But as I always like to remind people right around this time of year, it's about that, and Nebraska's competitive in that space, but it's about winning, and it's about where you can go and you can find a place. So I don't know how many shots Nebraska took at some of the higher guys in the list, but I don't think they would have been able to get any of them. And so I don't mind the idea of going to, a guy who's really talented, Elite 11 guy, nearly won the quarterback battle at Notre Dame this year over CJ Carr. It was neck and neck right at the end of things, and then giving him the reins to do his thing in your offense. And there is going to be some learning with that. There is going to be the adjustment to not only being the quarterback and starting all of the games, but also, experiencing what it means to be the starting quarterback, especially in a place like Nebraska and all those different things. And I do think it'll be Minchie at the end of the day. And so I think that's okay. And you're willing to live through it going in through 2026 and looking ahead to 2027. If everything, stays on track, you could put together a picture that says we're going to be really, really good in 2027, or we're going to really go for it in 2027. I know that's a really hard thing for people to hear. You're not punting on 2026, but it's really, really important, to get those feet underneath you. Nebraska just doesn't have a great sense of direction at the moment. And so getting young players who have years of eligibility on their tracker is an important thing for me. And I think they did that with this.
There are 4 quarterbacks left playing in college football on the cusp here of the CFP semifinals Thursday and Friday of this week. All 4 arrived at their current schools as transfers. That's just the way it goes in college football today. 2 had starting experience at previous Power 4 programs before they got to their schools this year. 2 did not. So Dante Moore came to Oregon from UCLA, where he was not a starter, and Trinidad Chambliss, being the total outlier in the group, came to Ole Miss from Division II Ferris State. And then, of course, you have Carson Beck at Miami, who was a starter at Georgia, and Fernando Mendoza at Indiana, who was a starter at Cal. So it's 50-50 on the way that it worked for the 4 quarterbacks at CFP semifinalists this year. And I'm not saying that that's what Nebraska's aim is for next season, but it's Nebraska's aim is to be successful. And those quarterbacks are running successful programs. And I think if you extrapolate that out to the entirety of college football, that's generally going to be what you find, is that about half of the quarterbacks who are leading successful programs are going to be doing it as transfers, or maybe they're not transfers, but they're in their first year at that school. And then the other half have been around and have done it at the Power 4 level before. So experience is not the prerequisite that you absolutely need to be good in college football, like it is in the NFL.
A lot of people, Mitch, had the expectation that that Nebraska was in a place where they, because Rule talked about the money, and he's like, hey, we're going to be able to go out and do this and this and this and this, and that's not the direction they went.
Spend the money on defensive linemen, spend the money on offensive linemen, spend the money on having a quarterback room that is in a situation so that if Minchie isn't the guy, or that he ends up getting hurt like Nebraska starter did this year, that you don't have to go to somebody who is a true freshman in his first real college football action. If you have 3 who've all got something under their belt going into next season, then I think you're immediately in a better spot than where Nebraska was in 2025.
And like I said, keep in mind, I think that this is about how many years you want that player to be in that position. And I think it was key for Nebraska to have a guy who's going to be your starter for 2 years, in my mind. But also, like I said at the very beginning, I do think it's about, what you could attainably attract at this moment. It's just, you have to admit that to yourself. Nebraska, it's going to be really hard for them to pitch to a guy who, just won 10 games this year at a Power 5 school to be like, hey, come be our quarterback, because we're going to take it to the next level. That clearly isn't happening. So Nebraska has to build that piece of it first to make it an attractive part. Look at Indiana. I mean, they could have had anybody they wanted. Indiana's been in the playoff 2 years in a row. They might win a national championship this year. They got everybody in the country lining up at this point. Josh Hoover is going to be their quarterback next year from TCU. They're going to get the running back from Boston College. I mean, they could put together an all-star team if they wanted to. Nebraska doesn't have that kind of thing to attract. We don't have to compare everything to Indiana, but it's money is one thing, but winning is the biggest part. Winning and having an identity, and Nebraska's got to start from scratch on that.